In this video, you will learn how to compare and order fractions using a few different strategies, including cross-multiplying and comparing to zero, half, and whole. We will start out comparing two fractions using cross-multiplication. We will compare these fractions using the symbols greater than, less than, or equal to. The first step for cross-multiplication is to start with the denominator of your first fraction and multiply it by the numerator of the second fraction. I like to draw an arrow up so I know where to put my number. So 4 times 1, and we have 4. I do the same thing, but I start with my denominator of my second fraction, and I multiply it by the numerator of the first fraction, making an X symbol. And I make sure to put the arrow so I know where to put my number. 2 times 3 is 6. Now all you have to do is say what is bigger, 6 or 4, and my symbol is going to eat the larger number. So 3/4 is greater than 1/2 because the 6 on the top is greater than the 4 on the top for the other fraction. Let's try another. We have 7/10 and 2/3. Let's multiply 10 times 2. Our arrow tells us where to put the number, 20. And the same, making our X, 3 times 7 is 21. These are very close, but 21 is greater than 20, so 7/10 is greater than 2/3. Let's try one more. We'll cross multiply our 10 times 1 gives us 10, and 5 times 1 gives us 5. So 10 is greater than 5, so we will have our symbol open towards the bigger number. So 1/5 is greater than 1/10. We can also say 1/10 is less than 1/5. You can also think about it as the size of the piece because you have the same numerator here. The numerator tells you that you have one piece, but the denominator tells you the size of the piece. Tenths are smaller than fifths because they are shared with more parts or more people. So if you think about it as a pizza pie that's split into 10 slices versus a pizza pie that's split into 5 slices, you're going to get a bigger slice when you have a smaller denominator. So 1/5 is greater than 1/10. 1/10 is less than 1/5. The first strategy we will use is cross multiplication. So I would take two fractions, let's just take the first two, and cross multiply them just like we did when we would compare two fractions. So we have 7 times 1, 7, and 5 times 2, 10. So the least here would be 1/5 is the smaller, and then 2/7. Now all we have to do is compare 3/9 to one of those fractions. Why don't we compare 3/9 to 2/7 to see if it's bigger than 2/7 or less than 2/7? So I'm just going to put some extra work over here. 2/7 and 3/9, and let's do our cross multiplication. 7 times 3 is 21. 9 times 2 is 18. So it looks like 3/9 is greater than 2/7, so it would fit in after 2/7. So here are your fractions ordered from least to greatest: 1/5, 2/7, 3/9. We didn't even have to compare 3/9 to 1/5 because we already know that 3/9 is greater than 2/7. And since 2/7 is also greater than 1/5, we don't even have to compare to 1/5. I like to check my work by just cross multiplying again once I have them in order. So 5 times 2, 10. 7 times 1, 7. We're good. Least, greatest. I could do it again. I have 7 times 3, 21. 9 times 2, 18. So again, 18 is less than 21, so we are still in order from least to greatest. Now we have a new set of fractions, and we already learned cross multiplication. So for these, I'm going to teach you about comparing to half, since one of our fractions is half. When we think about more than half, it means that it has more than half of its pieces. And we think about fractions less than half, it would have less than half of its pieces. So let's look at 4/6. Half of 6 would be 3, and we have 4, so we have more than half. When we look at 2/8, half of 8 is 4, and we only have 2, so we have less than half. So already we can see that one fraction is more than half and one fraction is less than half. We can go ahead and put half as our middle. We can go ahead and put 4/6 as greater than half and 2/8 as less than half. And now you have your fractions in order from least to greatest. For this next set of fractions that we want to order from least to greatest, I will teach you one more strategy, and this time we're going to be comparing to 0 and a whole. So when we compare to 0, that means that the fraction doesn't have many of its parts. And when we compare to having whole, that means that the fraction almost has all of its parts. So let's take a look at these three fractions. The first one is 4/5. 4/5 is really close to having all of its parts because our denominator is 5. If it had all of its parts, it would be 5/5. So that means that we're only one away from having all of our parts here. Another one that's close to having all of its parts is 2/3. The denominator is 3, so that means that there are 3 total parts, and we have 2 of them already. So having all of them would be 3/3, so we are only one away from having all of the parts, just like 4/5 was. So 4/5 and 2/3 are close to having all of their parts, but we don't know which one is greater or which one is less yet. But before we look at those two together, I'd like to look at 1/8. Now 1/8 only has one piece out of a total of 8, so it's missing 7 pieces to have a whole. So we can automatically say that 1/8 is definitely the least fraction. Now we just have to compare 4/5 and 2/3 to figure out which one is smaller and which one is bigger. And I like to use cross multiplication for that because they're both missing only one part, so we really can't tell. So 5 times 2 is 10, and 3 times 4 is 12. So we see that 4/5 is greater than 2/3. So we'll put 4/5 at our greatest and 2/3 as our middle. Now we have our three fractions ordered from least to greatest: 1/8, 2/3, 4/5. Thank you for watching my video. I hope it helped. Check out my Teaching Exchange classroom for worksheets and centers, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more videos.